Yo, we are back. I've just gotten just pressure to come back on, and I'm really glad that I did. So what I'm gonna do is I'm really gonna just recap 2024, and it was a pretty chill ride for the most part. A lot of growth, a lot of growth. So what I want to do is I want to really start and just share the things that I've learned through 2024 and share with you some of the insights that I picked up. And yeah, here we go. Well, I started off in January. Dude, I got to stay highly caffeinated for this. I started off in January and met some friends down in Arizona, mostly Aaron Velke and Marty. And I started with a personal growth retreat. And every time I go to see them, I always come back with something insightful. So one of the first things is the most significant times in our life are the ones that bring the most emotion, both bad and good. And where this kind of sticks in is from kind of like the biggest joys too, in both the joys and the pain, there is a rush of cortisol. And I've also learned that cortisol is one of the things human nature wise that helps us determine the future and ways to go. So let's say you were going down a path and you saw a rattlesnake, right? Like, oh shit, a rattlesnake. The cortisol jumps, so fight or flight, but that helps you remember the next time that you go around that bend and go around that path. Hey, just keep an eye out. There might be a fucking rattlesnake there. But that was a cool one that I learned from Aaron and Marty. The second one, and this is from the same retreat, that negative emotions are needed to succeed. Negative emotions also attract the things that you want the most. So think of a time that you had a goal and you didn't hit it. For me, that ended up being in Chicago, where I had a couple things that came up, and this is more during a Savage race. So I stopped by the Whole Foods up there, and I always grab some nutrition before the race. And I grabbed this bottle of what was organic coffee. So with this organic coffee, I'm like, great, I don't have to stop by anywhere. It's organic, so this is great. I usually use caffeine as a performance enhancer before races. Yeah, I'm not really sensitive to caffeine, so I could drink a lot of it. So I drank about, I want to say maybe about 16 ounces, maybe 20 ounces of it before the race. And what happened was, soon as we went off, I got about a kilometer, 2 kilometers in. I felt fast. My heart was racing. I'm like, oh, maybe it's just nerves. But then it started going really fast. And I'm like, oh shit. I ended up throwing up about 4 or 5 kilometers in while I'm running, and it really hindered what I was trying to do. You would think more speed in the form of caffeine, the better. Not in this case. I started cramping, and what also happened is my electrolytes. First of all, caffeine depletes electrolytes, but I was going on just Redmond's Relight, and I was both cramping and now throwing up in the middle of this race and running at the same time. But yeah, not my best effort. Actually, it was my best effort, just not my best performance. When I get back to the car afterwards, waiting to see how I did, I found out that I didn't place at all. So I didn't really do really well. But I looked at the bottle and it was espresso and not coffee. And I was like, oh shit, that explains it. I may be up for another 4 or 5 days. Not really, but that explained one, Jimmy Knapp, you gotta stay on top of your processes and don't try anything new. And Liam let me know about that. But what it also taught me was, going back to the negative emotions are needed to succeed. I felt a little disheartened at my performance, but I also learned a lot. I learned one, stay on process and read ingredients, but also that I can't rely on just Redmond's Relight on as far as electrolytes. I needed more sodium. So I made that change, and going into the championship series, I ended up doing really well. So on to the next one. My definition of humble has changed. What used to happen, and again, this is from Aaron and Marty. I got a lot. So the next three things that I'm gonna shout out are from them. But the definition of humble changed. It's no longer shrinking myself or my story or my accolades to make other people feel comfortable. My new definition that I learned back in January is ownership with awareness and service. So essentially, what they're telling me is if you're great, then be great. And I don't know why I needed to hear that, but I did. And what it did is it helps me just be me, and it was almost a little bit of freedom. Um, my job as a leader is to move people. I mean, I'm going to move you. I'm going to inspire you. I'm going to hold you accountable. And if I'm being held back by myself, I can't be very productive at that. But also, it's within context. For instance, if I was, say, running a football camp for middle schoolers, I'm going to show them maybe at like 50, 60% speed on what I could do. I'm not going to throw in my best triple fake, inside, outside, inside, go. They're not going to get it. And it's kind of like you're overdoing it. So the context is important. But my new definition of humble is ownership with awareness. While I'm doing this recording, I have Jake Dog in the studio, the Juice, Jewce. Right now, he's currently my ride or die. You might hear him bark in the background, but I didn't get him a microphone, he would eat it. The fifth one, this one's pretty cool. And I remember back in February, this is after the retreat with Aaron and Marty. I think I accidentally booked a call with them like simultaneously with the same issue, and they both gave me some very helpful feedback. And it was this. The issue that I had was kind of, it was wrecking my brain, and I didn't understand why this was happening. But that wasn't the important part. The important part was what they told me. It was, dog, don't judge the book or the movie halfway in. Nobody likes this part. I'm like, damn. So essentially what they're telling me is to be patient. Patience is the key, and just see the story all the way through. This gives me the trust that everything is going to work out as long as I control what I can control. And that was important for me because things have ended up all right. Back in March, I'm very good at telling stories. Not so well, yeah, but to you guys and in teaching and visualizing, but also in my head. Those are where the greatest stories exist. And I have always had an underdog mentality. If I didn't have it, I got it. I remember one time being in the gym and I was just doing high intensity interval training, and I was in the middle of my rest. It was a 90-second rest on a 30-degree incline, and a guy comes up next to me is like, "Hey, come on, you could do better." And in my head, I immediately villainized this guy, this poor guy. I was like, I think I told him like, "Hey, I'd like to see you try and do this." I said it with a smile and I said it with a joke, but that wasn't my intention. My intention was to really let him know where I was coming from. Um, but it didn't have to go there. The part of being the underdog is to eventually be the overdog. Um, and again, this is the last one, well, probably not the last one, but this is another one from Aaron, where he told me that it actually might have been either on a podcast or if it was a one-on-one, I can't remember. But he told me that the hero doesn't go from the place he lives, from his origin or from his town, and he does not go looking for hell. Hell is what he has to go through to accomplish the job. It's dramatic. And I think I was attached to the heroic story of every time that something happened. And I've had a lot in my life because I did have to go through hell to get to where I'm at. And it was hard. And there is probably a dopamatic, if that's a word, just addiction to that feeling of look what I did and turning back to like, look what I created. But that doesn't have to be for everything. This is one simple line that he gave me. What if it were easy? And I was like, shit. Yeah, I guess. What if it was easy? And that took a positive point of view and reframing in my head. Um, it was helpful, and it just releases some of the pressure off of my own shoulders. But yeah, for a while there, I was feeling really good, and again, I listened through a couple podcasts, and I was like, I am feeling so good right now. I am very well aware. So these next four or five things are some of my journaling that I did that would help me if I ever so-called stepped in shit again or started going through a rough time. And I just needed some tools. And, I think everybody needs coping skills, right? But this one's a good one. The first one of these is life won't be like this forever. Good or bad, it's soon gonna be gone, right? So, I mean, think about it. When you're on vacation, this is big for me because I've always felt bad for being on vacation. I'm like, oh man, like I need to go to work or I need to provide or I need to be doing something. But if I remember that it's not going to be like this forever, this water is not going to be this warm forever, my kids aren't going to be this age forever, my wife is not going to be right next to me all the time, it will soon be a memory. So I better enjoy it. And on the flip side, if I'm going through shit, it's not going to be like that forever. And there's always a light at the end of the tunnel, or there's an ending that is coming to whatever bad times that are coming. The second one is mundane successes are still big wins. So really just being gentle when I'm frustrated, I'm my hardest critic. There's nothing anybody, I'm sorry, could tell me uh, that is worse than what I used to say to myself. And when I'm frustrated, it would be compounding. And that voice comes from a good place. It's like, hey, dog, I see your potential and it's not there. But sometimes, like, I need to learn the context with me. Like, I need to be a little bit more gentle on myself. So when I'm nervous or mostly overwhelmed, a lot of people don't see it. And I call that gravity on myself. So even though that gravity is heavier now, sometimes small wins mean more than big wins. So essentially, if I have 245 pounds on my back and I take 3 steps, that is actually a bigger win than me taking 5 normal steps with no weight. And in the same regard, go easy on yourself. Um, you're gonna feel safe. You're gonna feel anxious. You're gonna feel nervous and overwhelmed. Um, but what if Cameron or Brody were going through this? What would they need to hear? And that reframe, just just taking it outside of myself and putting pretty much them into perspective. I'm like, dog, yeah. Sometimes I gotta chill. The fourth one really started hitting me hard is I owe the world nothing. So there's no agreement that or contract when I was born that I had to do or give anything. But also, people want to help me and they want or need nothing in return. And that restores almost like my faith in people as well. And the last one of these journaling entries was I'm going to be judged by my actions, not my thoughts. So getting shit done despite my mood is more impressive than, not. So stop discounting myself. These are all inspired by something that I've heard, and I immediately put pen to paper on that. So I think those were very insightful for me. Oh, then I started going into more journals and just digging deep. And I used to think that I wasn't afraid of anything. And it turned out that I'm not really afraid of anything external. Um, I'm weirdly not. I don't have nightmares, which is kind of weird. Most of my dreams are lucid, and I can control what goes on. Um, I mean, there's always the things that like what if something external would happen, like a bear came and went to attack my kid. I mean, I just don't want that. I that was would something I'd be fearful, but not within myself. Like I'm not afraid of like my wife hates it when I say that, but I'm not afraid of dying. It's going to happen. I'm just hoping that is peaceful and either that or quick. Um, but as I started digging into these, and this is like personal and self growth, it was there was one theme that started to come up, and it's external validation, and inherently that is a fear, mostly of like what people think. And I always say I'm a recovering people pleaser. So there was one line that came up, and it said, "If I stripped away all my titles, everything that I've accomplished, everything that I've ever done, created, whatever, are you still valued and are you still loved?" And my immediate answer was, yes. Fuck. I wish I could say yes to that. And going into 2025, that is my biggest personal growth goal, is to get to a place where I don't need any of that and I rely more on my intrinsic values. So again, going into the journal, this has been very insightful for me. But going into my intrinsic values, are like, what are they? So obviously, I mean, you get some of the people that know me are like, well, you're infatuated right now with resiliency and you're very tenacious. And yes, that's actually third on the list. First is growth and mastery. I have a drive for self improvement, and I'm trying to get down to this stuff at its core. Like, where does it come from? Because I mean, I seek excellence. I can't do anything. You guys know, man, when I fuck up, dog, I fuck up big. Like I don't like I full send it, right? I'm 100%. But again, I think it started when I've had a very athletic upbringing from when I was a kid, and I just know that yesterday's successes weren't enough. I mean, I've had people tell me that like, hey, I had a great month, 2 years ago, so I'm great at what I do. I'm like, yeah, dog. I won the spelling bee in third grade. I mean, yesterday doesn't really guarantee success tomorrow. So I know that I have to keep on growing. Um, Trigger alert. I'm sorry if that offends anybody, but I mean, sometimes it's not good enough. But I mean, if I'm going into, Marcus Aurelius and people that I really look at, like Stephen Kotler, and the disciplines of peak performance, um, growth is almost spiritual for me. And it's almost like an emotional need. Like I need to unlock my full potential because when that happens, it creates a ripple effect, and people around me are affected positively. I've done my fair share of affecting people negatively, um, but I am growing so hard and so fast and so intensely that my positive growth affects the people around me. So that's my first intrinsic value. And the second one is my leadership and influence. So it's kind of like the same thing. Naturally, I take charge. And I try to, the thing about that is it's sometimes there's a little PC or political game that needs to be played sometimes. And everybody needs to know my intentions are always for everybody to be happy and to get along. But I like putting myself in a position where people look up to me and I could guide them with integrity. And mostly because I've had a number of people that have done that for me. Whether, back in the day, back in college, and it was still peers, um, they would kind of lead the way, or even like culturally, um, I've had inspiring people in my life. So cultivating leadership isn't control, but it's more empowering others. It's almost letting go of control. Um, and that leadership satisfies my need to make a meaningful impact and really just better the community or the surroundings of people where I'm at. Um, it's at its core, it's impacting growth and transformation of others. And yeah, this next one, resiliency and tenacity. I mean, this is really just I'm in love with anything. Anything like nothing wants to stay. Goggins said this. Nothing wants to stand in the way of anything that is resilient. If something is just going to keep on coming after you and after you and after you, without any just form of slowing down, and take this on pretty much anything. Take this on a challenge that you're meeting, and think of it as energy. I mean, it could be just, I don't know, gaining weight or losing weight. I mean, if you keep on coming after your disciplines over and over again, that weight's going to either whatever you want to do. You want it to come on, then it's going to go on. If you want it to come off, then it's going to come off. But it's your disciplines on that. And if you just keep on attacking it, the whatever challenge that you have in your way, it has no other option. My approach to challenges, I mean, it reflects I never quit. I have a never quit attitude. I have a history of pushing through adversity. And I mean, this is not me being egotistical. This is actually me being humble. This is facts, son. Like, perseverance is really the only option. And I think a lot of us that understand this have just a massive head start in life. And that's the thing that I try and bleed down to the kids is, I mean, some of the society is getting really soft on this. And, not the naps. I mean, at our core, we push through. And it's really because, I mean, I believe this, it's a value of mine. I believe in raw talent. And the underdog mentality does come into play here sometimes, but it could be serving. But, it also, the resilience at its core, it validates my belief in human potential, that grit and determination can conquer any external challenge. It also builds internal strength. And I learned a lot from, I'm sure a lot of you heard Huberman's a podcast with Goggins on the anterior mid-cingulate cortex and how that grows and how it's larger in athletes than non-athletes. And it's really just, I guess if you break it down to its, if I'm going to tell a third grader, it's more about discipline. And the more disciplined you are, the more disciplined that you can be. I like that one. I went off a little bit on it. Didn't I? All right, so I won't beat a dead horse, but connection and mentorship is the next one. Just I deeply value growth and fostering that and that arising that in others. So if I see potential in people, it's because people have seen potential in me and they've given me a shot. And I believe the people that I work with are very, very capable. And Jacob was crying. He was looking at something. There's an emphasis on emotional intelligence here and creating a positive culture with anybody I mentor. And I want to be very clear that positive culture to me is not really me being nice all the time. I'm sorry, right? But think about your most favorite coach if you played at college or high school or even middle school. Think about your favorite coach. Most of the time, he's not the guy that gave you a hug every time. Most of the time, he's the guy in practice that made you do 10 burpees for dropping a pass or run a lap because you were using foul language after you dropped a pass, or was very intentional on you running that out cut at 7 yards and not 5 and not 9 because of timing. But it satisfies the need to give back, and it creates a long lasting effect. The goal of mentorship is to create mentors. The goal of leaders is to create more leaders, because the more leaders they are, the better off we'll be. The last one is really purpose and legacy. A purpose is probably one of the biggest drives that any man, not just myself, can have. It's really guided by a vision that's larger than oneself. And I say oneself because it's not just me. I mean, I know I aim to leave a mark, but it's also shaped by moments, and it's shaped by things that you've gone through. time is fleeting. And once you start realizing that, I think your purpose gets a little stronger. Um, some of the actions that we we kind of like put through are more purposeful when you have a purpose. It fulfills a need to like transform every day, and it makes you want to grow. Like when the path is clear, you know exactly where to go. And this resonates along all just domains of life. I was I learned, I don't know if it was this year, but I definitely learned about some of the vets that were in it might have been a VA in um, when Katrina hit New Orleans, and some of these guys were in wheelchairs and bedridden. And once they learned that they lost power and that where they were staying was soon going to be demolished by a hurricane, they gathered up and they formed an almost like an ambulance and rescue unit, and they saved that whole, not only their hospital but other nursing homes. These guys that they got up and walked, they started driving ambulance, they started driving vehicles, and this was like inspiring. And people are like, how do they do that? They're in bed and in wheelchairs, but give a motherfucker a purpose, a strong one that he'll die for, and that's a very powerful thing. Um, I have a couple more, but I'll leave with this one. This one is really from a study from Aliyah Crum, and I heard this on the Heberman podcast, and it was really just not about action. So our goals that we're going through 2025, they're not just the actions, but they're also your thoughts of the actions as well. So both of those have to be in line for you to maximize your opportunities on hitting your goals. She did a study with hotel workers, and she took one half. It was two parties. She took one half and said, "Hey, we're just going to monitor what you're doing, and what are your thoughts on how many calories you burn or how much you're exercising and working out." And the half that said, not that much, we're not really doing that much. They monitored that, and they took the other half and said, "Hey, everything that you're doing stairs. This is cardio. This is you're lifting people up. So this is a core. Like everything you're doing is a workout." And they started thinking, like, "Oh my God, this is a strenuous job, and I'm actually working out as I am working." That latter group ended up losing weight in a positive way because they thought that what they were doing was exercising. So keep that in mind as we go into our goals into 2025. And my promise to you is you're going to hear from me shortly. Guys, I really appreciate it. Thank you for holding my feet to the fire, and I'll holler at you soon. Napster, outro.